Okay, boxing fanatics, welcome to episode 40 of the podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined once again by Mr. Oscar Pick and Mr. Steve Wellings. Well, he's done it. Britain have a new world champion, Dalton Smith, knocking out Subriel Matias in the fifth round in in what is a bit of an upset, really. I think a lot of people thought that Smith had a chance to win, but I think him knocking out Matias always seemed maybe a little bit unlikely. Obviously Matias, seemingly had a good chin. Um, and especially the way the fight went, where it turned into a bit of a like a slugger fight, a bit of a dog fight. And I think in those circumstances, I think few people would have, predicted that Dalton Smith would have, outslugged Subriel Matias. But that's exactly what happened. Dalton Smith boxing beautifully earlier on, and then it became a bit of a bit of a trade up in the center of the ring. And yeah, Dalton Smith came out on top, showing good chin and good power as well, actually. Steve, I'm gonna come to you first. What's your initial reaction to Dalton Smith's win last night?
Yeah, fair play to Dalton. Obviously, you two boys called it. I thought Matias would get the job done. Well, right up until the end. If we go, rewind to that podcast and Oscar's point at the end, sort of had me thinking a little bit, and it kind of turned out to be true. Matias, if you get on top of these boys, these flat track bullies, sometimes you can push them back. And Kovalev was the same, and boxing has had many of these characters over the years. And Matias just I don't know. I wouldn't say he took Smith lightly at all, but he just doesn't seem like the same guy. That guy who was beating those people, um, unbeaten champion after challenger after challenger, and he was in their face. He got the hands up, and he was just working people over. He wasn't like that against Dalton Smith at all. And after about the third or fourth round, I saw him backing off. Hands were down, and he was clearly tiring. And I thought, this ain't the same guy that we've seen before. And Dalton Smith wasn't doing it the way Liam Farrow did it, which was the game plan, as they said afterwards. And putting him on the back foot, he was standing there trading with him and throwing heavy shots. And I just thought he was really good. And fair play, you two boys called it like at the end of the day. But he went there, he did the job. There weren't too many people in the arena, but apparently, although the atmosphere sounded pretty good to me, but I thought he was brilliant. He beat him at his own game.
Yeah, absolutely. I've almost bullied. Yeah, bullied the bully. So to speak. So to speak. Oscar, what about you? What did you? What obviously, yeah. What did you think?
Yeah, I think bullied the bully is a very fair assessment. Before the fight, anyone picking Smith must have said Smith on points. I think we both said that.
Yeah, we did.
I
Yeah.
couldn't see any predictions saying Smith by stoppage, and I don't know. As the fight progressed, I was kind of thinking to myself, could Matias sort of just absorb all this punishment and just come back stronger and find a second win, so to speak? And I was kind of anticipating that. Like as it obviously got to the kind of middle rounds, I was like, surely Matias is going to start sort of upping the pace a little bit because I didn't think Matias really threw an awful lot of punches. I mean, that could just be me, but I didn't feel like his work rate was really what it normally is, and obviously Smith deserves an awful lot of credit for that because obviously for my money at least, he controlled large spells of that fight. He was kind of authoritative with the jab, which I thought he would be. I think he's got a really nice sharp jab, and that's something that Matias sort of struggled to deal with, and he was just sort of dictating up to a point, but I don't think he had, full control. And this is where I was thinking, well, when's Matias going to start sort of, introducing his strengths to the fight and kind of do what he does best? And it ultimately never really came. Obviously, there was some, real fierce exchanges, and especially when they got up close, I thought Matias was getting the better of a lot of those exchanges. But then, Smith, I think his strength on the inside was something that might have shocked Matias a little bit because obviously we spoke before the fight about how Matias possibly underestimated Smith. Obviously, an American audience wouldn't know too much about Dalton Smith, and they'd see the unbeaten record. They see he hasn't been tested at world level, and it's easy to underestimate a fighter like that. But I think Smith, he's like an all rounder, isn't he? Like he's kind of like a box puncher, and but I think his strength is something that's a big advantage, and that's something that I think might have shocked Matias, especially on the inside, although he was maybe outlanded Smith a little bit at close range. I thought, that might have come as a surprise, and ultimately, Smith he got the job done in spectacular fashion. I thought was, yeah, really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's not the boogeyman anymore, but I still think, I don't know, in my opinion, the way Matias performed last night is always kind of how I've seen him, in my opinion. I've never seen like someone who's like really concussive puncher, and I guess you could argue his work rate is usually a bit better, but he's always someone who overwhelms you. And yeah, he just wasn't able to do that against Smith. I mean, it's possible. I mean, look, we don't know how Smith compares to other people he's faced in terms of power. I mean, Smith might be a bigger puncher than we give him credit for. But yeah, Matias maybe he was a bit cautious, but I think we do need to give Dalton Smith some credit as well that he did actually take a few flush punches and showed a good chin, to be honest. Didn't come close to going down or anything like that. Matias did have his moments. He did catch Smith here and there, but yeah, it didn't do much. I mean, two of the judges had Smith up at the time of the stoppage. One had Matias up. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think Dalton Smith was in control for the most part. In terms of the stoppage, so I'm going to start by saying I think it was a little bit early, actually. I don't doubt that Matias was in trouble. I don't doubt that Dalton Smith, caught him with a good shot. Um, I feel like maybe could have gone on for maybe 5 seconds more. Sounds terrible to say, but I don't know. I just feel like maybe Matias, as the defending champion, maybe deserved 5 seconds. Maybe, obviously, you never know what's going to happen. Dalton Smith could string together a combination, and then next thing you know, Matias is knocked out cold. But I still feel like maybe he deserved like just 5 or 10 seconds more. And if Dalton Smith was on him again, then stop the fight. That's my opinion anyway. Steve, what do you think about that? Was it a bit early for you, or do you reckon the referee got it just right?
Most of the time, it's always too early for me. I like a conclusive stoppage. I'm sort of famed for it, but I would have let him, I would have let him carry on. And there was a couple last night. I don't think it was as bad as the Caballel one. I wasn't a fan of that at all, but
Mm.
I like a conclusive stoppage. I know that they always say, "Oh, the writing's on the wall. Better too early than too late." Completely agree with that. I don't want to see anybody get hurt, obviously, but the boxing is the type of sport where we've seen so many people come back from adversity to do great things. So in that case, I didn't hate the Matias one as much as I've seen recently, and like I said, I referenced the Caballel one earlier in the evening, but I would have let him maybe have a chance to take a few more shots before he lost his title. But I think Oscar made a good point about the pressure. That type of pressure is not there. Hasn't been ever since including the Paro fight, and ever since. And I can't remember whether it was Valenzuela or Ramirez, probably Valenzuela. He also buzzed Matias a little bit in their fight, and Matias, I don't know, man. He's like I said, he was boxing off the back foot, and his work rate, it just wasn't anywhere near. Oscar's absolutely right. He wasn't throwing punches. He landed a few uppercuts. Another like Dan Raphael thought he was doing well. Raul Marquez, I think it was on commentary, who I'm old enough to remember fighting at the time, was a good fighter, but I think he had a bit of a nightmare last night. I thought it was an even Stevens fight for most of it. I didn't see Matias coming back into it and dominating. He came back into it because he gave the first round up. He was doing very little, but he used to do that back in the day. I mean, I was looking at his record earlier. I mean, the amount of undefeated fighters he's beaten by this sort of route, obviously, the late Maxim Dadashev was 13-0, Malik Hawkins 18-0, Djokomboyev was 18-0, Ponce was 30-0, Ergashev was 23-0, Cuello in his last fight was 24-0. If he'd have beaten Smith, that would have been another one, 18-0. He just chewed these people up early after a couple of rounds of fiddling about doing nothing, and just added that relentless pressure to head and body. And he's never done that since the Power fight, and especially last night. Smith was backing him up and bullying him. And I can't even remember really what your original question was, Dan. I think it was about the stoppage. That's it. Yeah. So the stoppage was early for me, but this isn't the same Matias. That Oscar's absolutely right.
Fair enough. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, that's a good point. He did have a lot of good wins. In fairness to Matias, he's been a lot of undefeated fighters, um, which is fair enough. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess I've never really rated Matias too highly, but I can't argue with the wins he's had, to be honest. Um, I agree about these early-ish stoppages are taking away a bit of the drama from boxing, which is it's a double-edged sword. Like it's probably saving more people, but that drama and that excitement, is at risk of going a little bit. It's kind of maybe a little bit. I can't believe I'm saying that, but maybe becoming a little bit too watered down, maybe. Um, And the Caballero one, that was a terrible, terrible stoppage, to be honest. I mean, yeah, that's awful. Oscar, what about you? Stoppage, good or bad?
I agree with you too, to be honest. I think it probably could have gone on a little bit longer. But yeah, watching the boxing last night, I actually thought the worst stoppage of the night on that Caballero card. I don't know if either of you two watched the Herrera Nunes fight, but that was I thought that was bewildering, like because it was a competitive fight. Like Nunes was having his moments, and you know it was a real good watchable fight. And then all of a sudden, like Nunes gets buzzed a bit, and obviously ref waves it off and stops fight. And obviously the ref ended up on his ass somehow. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, that was a bit of a weird one. But to be honest, like my initial reaction to the stoppage for the Smith Matias fight was like, I mean, I was just glad that Dalton Smith got the win ultimately because
Mm.
everything that came before the fight, the failed drugs test, and obviously with Dalton Smith, you know, being a Sheffield guy, and obviously us crowning a new world champion, I was just happy he got the win more than anything else. And I wasn't expecting him to get it inside the distance, and when he did, I was almost like not in shock, but did definitely surprise me a little bit. Took me off guard. And looking back, probably could have gone on a bit longer. But I think in terms of the you know, the intensity that Dalton Smith had behind him, and you know his momentum in the fight, I think he probably would have got the job done maybe like 10 or 15 seconds afterwards. So I don't have any major complaints about it, but it probably could have gone on, you know, a little bit longer maybe.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it probably didn't affect the result. I think it was like I was saying, it was going one way. Smith was on his way to winning. Um, but I guess yeah, it's always nice if it's just a bit more conclusive. I remember seeing a stoppage of I think it was Rolly Romero versus I think was it Barroso or something like that, and that was just another weird stoppage. It was like they were trading and then the referee just jumped in. It was really bizarre. I'm hoping this doesn't become a hoping this doesn't become a thing. But we'll have to see. In terms of Smith, how much of a statement is this for Smith? Because I think most of us did kind of consider him a bit of an unknown quantity going into this fight. He didn't really have any massive names on his record. Obviously, he won the British title. He beat, I think it's Jose Zepeda. I think he beat him as well. So not really a lot of big names there. Um, I said this in the previous pod, but yeah, it just really reminds of Kell Brook so much. Just like because even Kell Brook at that point was a bit of an unknown quantity as well. And then he went overseas and done the job. Steve, in your estimation, has Smith gone up basically in your estimations based on this win against Matias?
Oh yeah, definitely gone up in my estimations because it kind of last week we touched upon it as well. He's going to prove to us whether he can reach that world level or not, and I think he definitely unequivocally proves that he can hang in that sort of wheelhouse with those kind of guys. And obviously, the hard work starts now regarding defenses and stuff and what Eddie's going to do for him. Is Eddie going to back him now like he didn't before, sort of sending him over to New York and get him that Hillsborough fight that he wants? And I imagine they'll do that and then look for bigger fights, unifications and stuff. So he's definitely gone up in my estimation because before last night, I wasn't sure whether he could hang in that world level or not, and he showed against Matias that he can. And stiffer tests will come, as in Matias is obviously a beast, but there's other guys who are going to give him different looks. People are going to move about, have good footwork, good hand speed, all these different kind of world level abilities and talents that he's going to have to deal with. But I mean, he's not going to have to worry about that today. At the moment, he's a champion, and he's gone up in my estimation. And fair play to his dad too. I've never been a massive fan of him for whatever reason. Although I did think it was a bit strange that he was sort of lying on his son for about 3 minutes afterwards. I mean, I thought they should have got the fellow a bit of air or something, man. He just had an absolute war for 5 rounds and he was sort of getting crushed in the ring. But I could understand why they were all so buzzing. And then Eddie was back on board and he's beaten the drugs cheat. Someone said earlier a bit of a quip saying he's done more for clean boxing than the WBC or something by beating Matias. So I thought that was quite a good one. But no, he's definitely gone up in my estimation. He's a verified world champion. He's right in the mix with the other boys now, Dan.
Yeah, yeah, quite heroic to be fair. Some would say. Um, I mean, these drug tests happen a lot, but these failed drug tests happen a lot. But I guess yes, some would say justice was served, karma, whatever you want to call it. You know, Matias maybe got what was coming to him. If he is guilty. Um, Oscar, can you see Dalton Smith becoming unified, or do you reckon that's his kind of ceiling? Is it just kind of, he's won a world title now. Does it get any better? Can he hang basically with the other world champions, do you reckon? I know it's hard to say after one fight. There's still so much to find out. It's a very strong division. We've got Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson happening soon. Got obviously Richard Hitchens around as well. So it's a very stacked division. But in your mind, I mean, does he have any chance of, becoming unified and, being the main guy in at 140?
Well, it's difficult for me to kind of say because I want to just kind of heap, all this praise on Dalton Smith. He's obviously had his moment and it was a great performance, and the fact that he's become world champion is a great achievement. But ultimately, looking at those other world champions, if I'm being brutally honest, I can't see him beating any of them. I think Richardson Hitchens is a very good technician. He's someone who I could see outboxing Smith. And again, like I said at the beginning, Smith is really good in the sense that he's an all-rounder. He does a lot of things to a high standard, but there's no real sort of X factor, I don't think. In terms of the power, in terms of the you know, technical side of it, in terms of all of that. So I think he'd struggle with the other champions in the division because they've all got, they all do certain things really well. Like you got Gary Antoine Russell, who's a real slick operator, and I think he's difficult to hit cleanly. And I can, Smith. The thing is, Matias last night or earlier this morning or whatever, he was there to be hit essentially. Like Smith didn't have to go looking for him. But with these guys like Richardson Hitchens, Shakur Stevenson, Gary Antoine Russell, they're great defensive fighters. Smith's unlikely to have, anywhere near the same success against these guys. And then Teofimo Lopez, who's, completely different kettle of fish altogether. He's unpredictable. He's explosive. I could see that being, a real hard night for Smith. So yeah, although, great win against Matias, I'm really pleased to see him become world champion. I'm not too sure he'll be able to unify against these other guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a stacked division. Like we said, I will say that I think Smith, if I look at him, I think what stands out is actually his timing and his accuracy. I do think that's quite elite. I think the way he connects with his punches is quite elite. I mean, his power, he knocked out Matias, who's never been knocked out before. Maybe his power is his X factor. I guess time will tell. Maybe he hits harder than we realize. I know we think about that Jermaine guy who we couldn't get out of there, who was running around the ring for the whole fight. But maybe that is his X factor because I don't think Richardson Hitchens is a massive puncher, to be fair. And I don't think Teofimo Lopez is a massive puncher at 140 either, to be honest. So that could give him an edge potentially. I mean, I guess time will tell. Um, Steve, do you see anything else in Dalton Smith which maybe separates him from the rest, or do you kind of agree with Oscar and just think he's an all rounder? He's a B plus at everything, but not really an A star in anything.
Yeah, I agree with Oscar. Similar to the Matias, whether he can adapt and whether he can show different things. I think the fact that he dragged Matias into a fight last night suited him, and he caught him with an absolute cracking shot on the chin, and then he just followed it up, and that was the end of it. But these other guys, I mean, Hitchens, Matchroom's sort of fed up with him, because he's a free agent and he's like a lesser, exciting Shakur Stevenson. Hitchens, he's gonna struggle. I think he should have stuck with Matchroom and not run his mouth off after that last fight and tried to get unifications. I think Lindolfo Delgado is his mandatory, so he's going to have to fight him soon. But as for Smith, yeah, guys like Hitchens, it's difficult to catch up with them. Sandor Martin, I noticed, is number 3 as well. You want to avoid people like that because that German, I mean, Smith could have gone after him and probably stopped him, but it's hard to stop somebody who doesn't want to be stopped. I mean, remember when Paul Butler ran for like 11 or 12 rounds against Inoue, who's one of the greatest finishers of the sort of modern era? It's hard to knock somebody out at that level who doesn't want to be knocked out. And in the end, Smith just thought, I'll see out the distance here against this guy, Jaman, because he wasn't coming at him. But I'm looking down the WBC rankings here and thinking who they might pick out for the next kind of opportunity. And I'm just looking down the bottom 15. I see guys like Mark Chamberlain at 14, Jack Rafferty at 13. Kenneth Sims, I know he was with Matchroom before, number 12. Duarte's a golden boy, don't think it'll be him. John Fernandez at number 7. I interviewed John Fernandez a while back. He's a nice guy. Him and Smith were supposed to fight a couple of times for the European title, and it never happened for whatever reason. I know Fernandez was injured the one time. Smith might have been the other time. I can't remember. But maybe someone like him could be drafted in for a defence. I could see them picking someone like that up, maybe, as a sort of voluntary, whatever the WBC allowed them to do. But and then go on to fight the other guys who all have different stylistic things they bring to the table, like the likes of Isaac Cruz. I mean, I don't know whether Smith could deal with somebody with him. There's a if he was to move up or down or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting options for him, I suppose now, and he'll be able to make a bit of money, whatever he chooses to do.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like with these British fighters, once they have a world title, they do like to milk it a little bit because the world title does. It's like it automatically increases your purse, doesn't it? So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if there's just a homecoming next fight. To be honest, and maybe it makes sense a British opponent. Mark Chamberlain, Jack Rafferty. I could envisage that. To be
Yeah.
honest, I could definitely envisage
They
that.
could bring him home the way you mentioned Kell Brook. I thought that was a good example. And also Junior Witter, the way Nick Hennessy sort of got him the fight with Vivian Harris. And then he had a couple of defenses. I think Arturo Maruro
Mm.
was one of them. I can't remember the other one, but he dealt with Witter. He was also a WBC, the same light welterweight champion as well, actually, funnily enough. So, they might be able to bring him home and get him a defense like that. And then maybe a mandatory comes along and he might be able to get another one out of that before they move him on. Maybe taking that sort of Witter route.
Well, hopefully, like I said, Thomas, but hopefully he doesn't do what Kell Brook does and faces someone two divisions higher than him, and basically, ruin his career. Um, Oscar, we mentioned this on the last episode, but I don't know. I feel like the names are just synonymous now, and I feel like maybe there's arguably more potential than ever for an Azim Smith fight. Are we closer than ever now for this fight? I mean, I didn't actually mention him there previously. Maybe that's one that can still marinate. But look, it's fair to say, look, Azim's team, they haven't been overly keen to fight Smith, and now Smith has a world title. Are we closer now for that fight, or is that still something that's down the line when Azim, I don't know, matures a bit more?
Well, I'd really like to see it now. I'm sure everyone, all the fans would love to see it. So, but I don't think it's one that makes sense, at this moment in time. I think you guys are right. I think they'll take Smith back to Sheffield, try and build him a little bit as a world champion. I'm wondering if the WBC will order the Puello fight. I don't know if he's mandatory or anything, but that could be an option. And obviously, Adam Azim was fighting Gustavo Lemos at the end of this month, um, which is a solid test. One you'd expect him to get through. Um, and I think Adam Azim's sort of in a position now where he kind of the thing is I really like Azim. I actually fancy him against Smith. I think Adam Azim would beat Smith purely based on skill and speed because he's one of the fastest fighters out there at the minute. I think from what I've seen of him, but I think it's interesting because whereas before this fight, Smith kind of didn't really have much of a resume. As you say, his best win was probably Jose Zepeda, who was washed. But now he's proven himself at world level. He's got himself a title. He's got a lot more bargaining power. Now Adam Azim's sort of on the other. It's almost like the roles of reverse. Where Adam Azim, although he beat Kurt Scooby in his last fight, it was a bit of a sort of unknown quantity. He's in a position now where he needs to start proving himself at world level. Like Dalton Smith proved himself by beating an actual world champion, dethroning him. Azim kind of needs to get to that level really to justify those two fighting each other. So yeah, no, it could be interesting.
Well, I mean, Azim's obviously there's quite an age gap there with Azim and Dalton Smith, but Dalton Smith's only 28 as well. And I just feel like sometimes they try and marinate these fights too much. Again, I keep thinking about Kell Brook and Amir Khan. I mean, I don't know, there maybe a little, it's not crazy similar, but maybe it's similar in the way that, that fight was left too long and then, they fought, a lot longer than they should have, basically. They should have, that fight should have happened in their prime. It didn't. I wouldn't want the same situation to happen here. Um, I mean, why not? Why not happen next? I mean, when you've got people like Turkey around, I'm sure they get good purses for it. It maybe be more worth the risk than previously than the pre Saudi era. Um, let's finish with Matias Smith. Steve, what do you think Matias should do now? I mean, I think we talked about his last episode. He's 33 years old. I think Oscar said, he's just looking for, a few cash outs before he basically calls it a day. Um, can Matias basically sounds terrible, but can he be recycled again? Maybe brought on against another kind of unknown quantity.
Yeah, he can be recycled again for somebody else as a stepping stone, I think. But as for a champion, I think the gloss that was on him has disappeared now. And like I mentioned Kovalev earlier, and after the sort of ward fights, which I have plenty of issues with, but I'm not going to them now. But we fought Elado Alvarez, who sort of knocked him out. And then after that, everybody sort of put it on him a little bit, anybody decent. And he was never the same fight again. That'll be the same with Matias. I think they can try and recycle him through as best as they can. But anybody half decent, just put it on him now. And I don't think he's the best trainer in the world. I don't think he has the best attitude in the world either. Before he become mainstream, he was a bit of a madman. So I don't think that, given the physical capabilities and the mental sort of limitations, that he's going to get back to that. The boogeyman aura is lost now. He had his excuses afterwards for obvious reasons. The first time around, and then the Power one as well, maybe a little bit because he beat Puello, but I don't. That aura has gone from him now. I don't think they can ever restore that. So if he gets himself back to world title level, which he might do by overwhelming people, as soon as he fights anyone half decent who's going to stick it on him, I think he's done for.
Oscar, what do you think? Do you agree with Steve?
Yeah, I agree with Steve. It's funny because obviously I don't know much about Matthias as a person, but you can kind of gather from what you see of him and in interviews and at press conferences his kind of aura. Like he seems like the type of character that just kind of is in a little bit in love with himself, and he can't see himself doing anything wrong. And I think that's almost his downfall, where he's not disciplined enough to kind of he can get to this level, but he can't stay at this level. And he's clearly sort of fallen in love with his power, maybe sort of similar to what Kovalev might have done. And I think even some of his comments post fight, I think he said something along the lines of, "Oh, I could never anticipate anyone knocking me out." And obviously, a lot of fighters would say that, but I think with him it's like he's kind of put himself on such a high pedestal, but he's not actually done the hard work to kind of justify it. Whereas Dalton Smith, on the other hand, you can tell he's been working tremendously hard for his opportunity, and he saw this as an opportunity where if he allowed it to slip away, he might not have ever, had another chance to become a world champion. So it was interesting to see those two contrasting attitudes. And yeah, I agree with Steve. I don't think Matias necessarily has the discipline to kind of get back to a level like this.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. And yeah, he's definitely towards the latter stages of his career now. I know he's had a good career. I mean, I like to think Matias has made some money. He's headlined in Puerto Rico, even though that wasn't a good night for him. Yeah, it's down to him really. I mean, I do feel like he's like I guess a bit of a tough guy. I can see him carrying on, but yeah, it's hard to imagine. I think now that he's lost twice, I think it's hard. I think people are going to go in there with just more confidence against him. Really, they know he's beatable now. They know he's very beatable. He lost to Para and Dalton Smith, so people are going to be fancying their chances against him. Absolutely. All right, guys, we're going to call it there. Thanks a lot for listening as always. Thank you to Oscar and Steve for joining me once again. And yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, if you like this episode, please like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.